My name is Maddie Cross, 38, a commander in the United States Navy, and I had built a career most people in my family never bothered to understand. For years, I stayed quiet, kept the peace, and let my brother be celebrated while my own work was reduced to a joke. But when my family dismissed me as the dog girl, at the very moment the Navy saw exactly who I was, I made a choice that changed everything. Have you ever been overlooked by the people you gave your best to? Tell me your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before I get into what happened, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to stand up after being underestimated, hit like and subscribe for more true stories about boundaries, self-respect, and reclaiming your worth. What happened next might surprise you. I grew up in a house where love was real, but attention was rationed. That is not a complaint, it is an accounting. Portsmouth, Virginia, in the early 1990s was a Navy town in the full sense. The base was the economy, the uniform was the currency, and achievement was the only language anyone bothered to translate. Our father wore dress whites in the framed photograph above the mantel. Our mother kept the household running with the particular efficiency of a woman who had learned to function without backup. And Ethan, my brother, 6 years my senior, was the headline of every conversation that happened in that house for as long as I can remember. He was not a bully. I want to be clear about that from the start, because the easy version of the story makes him one, and that would be a lie. He was bright and magnetic and effortlessly good at things, and he had no idea what any of that cost me, because nobody told him, and I would not have known how to say it. I was 7 years old, and I worshipped him. I followed him through every interest he picked up: baseball cards, model aircraft, the history of Pacific Theater naval engagements, and I was good at all of it, and none of that was the point, because the point was Ethan and I was the echo. My mother, Caroline, was not deliberately cruel either. She was a woman shaped by a military household and by a culture that treated rank and visible achievement as the primary currencies of worth. Ethan accumulated both early and naturally. I was fed and loved and driven to school, but the house read Ethan as the headline and me as the supporting text. And in the way that children absorb the structures around them without questioning whether those structures are fair, I absorbed this one. I called it looking up to him for a very long time before I found a more accurate word for it. The particular arithmetic of our family was this: whatever I accomplished, it was noticed in the way you notice the weather, briefly, without annotation. What Ethan accomplished was recorded. His Little League uniform was in a frame on the wall. My athletic medals were in a shoebox in the closet, which my mother kept because she was not careless about it. She was simply selective in a way she never examined. I did not examine it either, not for years. At 7 and 8 and 9 years old, I simply tried to keep up with him, and at 10 and 11, I began to develop a quiet certainty that if I worked hard enough and long enough, the ledger would eventually even out. Children are optimists about the systems they are born into. It is one of the more useful lies childhood tells you. By the time I was 12, Ethan was 18 and preparing to leave for the Naval Academy at Annapolis. And the house treated this the way houses treat events that confirm everything they have already decided about themselves. My mother cried at the kitchen table when his acceptance letter arrived. She called my grandmother and my aunt and our father's old commanding officer who had stayed in touch. I sat at the top of the stairs and listened to her voice carry through the house, full and warm in a way it did not always go, and I understood something without being able to name it. The moment mattered. The moment was for Ethan. I went back to my room and finished my homework. He left in the summer of 1999, and the house contracted around his absence in the way a room contracts when you remove a piece of furniture that was carrying more weight than anyone realized. My mother managed. I was 12 and capable, and I did not require much managing, which may have been part of the problem. The children who require management get attention as a structural matter. I did not signal distress, so I did not receive intervention. I received a kind of benign neglect that I mistook, for most of my adolescence, for independence. What I was actually doing was learning to be small. I was learning to calibrate my volume against the room to arrive at the level that would be received without friction. I was good at school in the way that does not make teachers worried and does not make parents notice. I was good at athletics in the way that wins the event but does not make the newspaper. I was, in the language I would develop much later, a competent operator who had learned that drawing attention to her competence was not cost-free. Ethan graduated from the Naval Academy in May of 2003. He was commissioned as an ensign, pay grade 01, United States Navy, and we drove up to Annapolis for the ceremony, my mother and I, and I was 16 years old, and I watched him stand at attention in Dahlgren Hall in his white uniform, and I felt something crystallize in my chest that was not jealousy and not resentment. It was direction. It was the first time I understood that I wanted this. Not his specific path, not yet, but the thing underneath the ceremony, the thing the uniform was pointing at. Service, competence, formally acknowledged. Work that mattered in the specific way that naval service mattered, in rooms where the stakes were real. I told him afterward what I had decided. We were standing in the courtyard after the reception, and he ruffled my hair the way he had when I was 9 and said, "Sure, why not? You'd make a decent officer. You're organized enough." He was 22 years old, and he meant it kindly. I was 16, and I heard it as the fullest endorsement available. I did not yet know how to hear it for what it actually was. A man who had not yet learned to take me seriously, doing so in the only register he had. I drove home from Annapolis in the back seat while my mother told the story of the ceremony to my aunt on the phone, and I watched the highway unfold through the window, and I thought about what I was going to do with the next 9 years of my life. And I was absolutely certain it was going to add up to something worth watching. That was not arrogance. That was the only kind of faith I had access to, at 16, in a house where faith was mostly extended to someone else. I entered the Naval Academy in the fall of 2005. I did this on my own terms, with a record that did not require anyone to advocate for me, and I did not make a production of it because by then I had already learned that making a production of things had a cost I was not interested in paying. My mother told people at her church group. She did not call my grandmother. I noticed. I filed it. I was 18 years old, and I had a lot of work in front of me, and I had already begun the habit of compressing the things that hurt into the parts of myself I did not examine on working days. That habit would serve me well for a very long time. It would also cost me more than I knew how to count, until a dog ran across a gym floor in Virginia Beach and forced me to start the accounting. The Naval Academy took 4 years and gave me more than I expected, and less than I pretended. I graduated in June of 2009, commissioned as an ensign, and Ethan, lieutenant junior grade by then, and climbing, sent a card that said he was proud of me. My mother attended the ceremony and cried, which was the right response, and I was grateful for it. I was 22 years old, and I had done the thing, and for approximately 6 weeks after commissioning, I felt the particular satisfaction of having arrived at something I had aimed at for a decade. Then I reported to my first ship, and the satisfaction gave way to the harder, more useful feeling of actual work. And I discovered something about myself. I was very good at the mechanics of naval service, and genuinely uncertain whether the mechanics were the point. I was promoted to lieutenant junior grade in 2011, lieutenant in 2013, and I performed well at every billet I held. My fitness reports said things like exceptional potential and outstanding officer. My commanding officers recommended me for increasingly responsible assignments. By every external measure, I was on a solid trajectory, and I kept pulling towards something I had not found yet. The feeling was not dissatisfaction in the conventional sense. I was not bored, and I was not failing. I was a lieutenant doing lieutenant things in a world full of lieutenants doing lieutenant things. And the work was real, and the stakes were real, and I was good at it. But there was a friction I could not name. A sense that the work in front of me was not quite the work I was built for. In 2013, I was attached to a joint exercise in a training environment that put me alongside a Naval Special Warfare canine team for the first time. I was 26 years old, and I watched a Belgian Malinois named Sergeant Clear a training structure in under 40 seconds, working in almost perfect silence with his handler, a chief petty officer who communicated with the dog in a language that was not language, that was posture and breath, and the accumulated trust of several thousand hours of common work. I did not look away. I stood in the observation area, and I watched the dog work, and I thought, that is the work. That is what I want to be responsible for. I cannot explain it more precisely than that, and I have thought about it many times since. Something in the way the dog operated, fully committed, technically perfect, working without ego or ambivalence, answered something in me that the standard fleet billets were not answering. The handler relationship was part of it. The operational stakes were part of it. The fact that this particular field was not glamorous or visible in the ways that led to quick promotion was also, I suspect, part of it, though I did not know that yet. What I knew was that I needed to pursue it. I spent the next 2 years researching the Naval multi-purpose canine program and positioning myself for the handler pipeline application. I did not tell my family what I was considering. By 2014 and 15, the family gatherings had developed a predictable rhythm. Ethan's career was discussed in detail, with toasts when appropriate, and mine was present in the room the way furniture is present in a room, acknowledged when someone bumped into it, otherwise unremarked. Ethan was promoted to Commander 05 in 2015. He was 34 years old and on a surface warfare track that my mother could describe clearly to her friends, which mattered to her in ways she would not have recognized as mattering. I was 28 and a lieutenant, solid and untroubling, and operating 2 full pay grades below him, which I understood was not unusual given our commissioning gap and his accelerated timeline, but which Caroline had nonetheless translated into a verdict. At a family dinner in the winter of 2015, my mother toasted Ethan's promotion with the champagne she kept for occasions. I was asked, somewhere between the toast and the dessert, what I was planning to do. I said I was applying for the Naval canine handler pipeline. There was a pause. Ethan said something about it being an interesting option, in the tone of a man who is choosing his words carefully so as not to say what he actually thinks. Caroline pivoted to dessert. Dogs, though, she said, and this was not a question. Maddie, there's no future in that. Ethan's track, that's a career. I ate my food. I did not argue. I had already submitted the application. I just had not told them yet. In the spring of 2016, at 29 years old, I was accepted into the NSLUT multi-purpose canine handler pipeline. I found out alone in my BOQ room, late in the evening, reading an email on my laptop. I sat with it for a few minutes and then I sent a brief note to the program coordinator confirming my acceptance. Then I called no one because I already knew how the call would go, and I had decided that I was done calibrating this particular decision against other people's capacity to receive it. I would tell my family when it was already done. I would tell them, and they would respond the way they always responded, and I would file it the way I always filed it. That part of the story I knew by heart. What I did not know yet was what the work itself would ask of me. That part I was about to find out. The handler pipeline was harder than I expected, which means it was exactly hard enough. I spent 2016 and most of 2017 in training, the physical conditioning, the obedience and detection fundamentals, the tactical integration with ANS-AST elements, the specific and unforgiving curriculum of learning to build trust with an animal who is entirely willing to assess you and find you insufficient. Dogs do not extend professional courtesy. They do not give you the benefit of the doubt because your fitness reports are good. They respond to what you actually are in the moment, which is either enough or it is not. I was enough. That is not a boast, it is a technical description. I completed the pipeline in 2017 and was assigned as a working dog handler within a NAST element. And the work that followed was the most demanding and the most clarifying work of my career. In 2019, I was promoted to Commander 05, United States Navy. The same year, Ethan was promoted to Captain 06. Both of our promotions happened within the same calendar year, his in the spring, mine in the fall. I did not learn about his until I called home to tell our mother about my own, and she said, already moving past it, "Oh yes, and Ethan made captain in April, did I tell you?" She had called him a dozen times the week he pinned on captain. I received a text that said, "Congrats!" with a party hat emoji. I have thought about that text many times. I don't think she sent it carelessly. I think she sent it the way people send acknowledgments when they have used up their register of attention and are doing the administrative version of recognition. Captain is legible. Captain has a clear cultural weight, even outside military circles. Commander requires explanation. She did not want to do the explaining, and so she did not. I filed it. I had become very good at filing. Bear came into my life in 2020. He was a Belgian Malinois, born approximately April of 2018, about 2 years old at the time of our assignment, and the first time I worked with him, I understood within 40 minutes that he was exceptional. Not friendly, not in the way people mean when they say a dog is friendly. He was discerning. He assessed everyone he encountered against a standard I could not fully articulate, but could observe in the results, and most people he assessed as adequate and no more. During our first training session, he worked with me with a focused intensity, that the training cadre noticed and did not comment on, because they were professional enough to know that commenting on it would not help. What I had with Bear was not sentimentality. I want to be clear about that. He was a military working dog, and I was his handler, and our relationship was defined by the operational requirements of the program and the 1,000 hours of work that built the kind of trust that holds under pressure. He was not my pet. He was my partner in the specific and serious way that the word means something when lives are contingent on it. By 2021, Bear and I had completed 2 overseas operational tours. He performed at the highest assessment tier in every evaluation. The unit citation from that period has his name in the supporting documentation alongside mine, and this is simply a fact, the kind of fact that belongs to the official record and cannot be revised. My family did not know about any of it. Operational details are not briefed to family as a matter of routine, and I was not in the habit of volunteering the shape of my deployments to people who had already decided that shape was not particularly interesting. At Christmas of 2021, I was 34 years old and home at my mother's house in Portsmouth. An aunt asked about my work. Before I could answer, my mother said, "She does the dogs." A laugh went around the table, not malicious, not mean-spirited, just the easy laugh of people who have been given a punchline and are taking it. Nobody asked a follow-up question. Ethan was mid-story about a flag officer he worked with. He did not interrupt himself to correct her. "She does the dogs. You know, military working dogs. It's a different kind of career." I excused myself to call my kennel manager about a dog that had a minor training injury during the week. This was a real call that needed to happen, and I made it from the back porch while the family finished dinner, and when I came back inside, Ethan was still telling his story, and my food was still on the table, and nothing had changed. I ate. I drove back to my hotel. I did not cry about it, because by then I had learned that crying about it was a form of hoping it would be different, and I had stopped hoping for that particular outcome with any urgency. I filed it. I was very full of filed things by then. October of 2022. I am 35 years old and outside Deir ez-Zor, Syria, in the dark, and Bear is hurt, and I am carrying him. I will not overdramatize this. The operation was a nighttime action in collapsed urban terrain, and the specifics are what they are and belong to the operational record. Bear took shrapnel, pulling a wounded operator clear of a collapsed alley, a decision he made in the space of a second, as trained, as built, as completely himself as he ever was. I reached him and assessed the injury and picked him up and covered 2 kilometers under fire, back to the extraction point. I monitored his breathing on the helicopter. I counted his breaths and made the particular private deals that people make with themselves in situations where the outcome is not certain. He was alive when we landed at the forward base. 3 days later, I sat at a table at 0200 hours and wrote the citation for the K9 Medal of Heroism in the formal language the form required. What the form did not have space for was the part where I counted his breaths on the helicopter and negotiated with myself about what I would do if they stopped. The citation was co-signed by a Rear Admiral named James Whitfield, and Bear was awarded the medal upon his return to the United States. My left forearm had superficial shrapnel scoring when I came home. I wore long sleeves at Thanksgiving. Nobody asked. December of 2022. Bear was medically cleared and reassigned to a Naval Special Warfare Development Group element at Dam Neck Annex, Virginia Beach. His new handler was Senior Chief Petty Officer Travis Booker, E-8, United States Navy. We were separated. I did not tell my family he was gone. I was not sure they knew he had existed. In January of 2023, I was reassigned from line handler to operations officer of the NSDAL's multi-purpose canine program, a senior O5 staff billet based in San Diego, responsible for the placement and oversight of every working dog assigned to NSDAL's elements across the enterprise. The job was significant. It was the kind of significant that people inside the program understood immediately, and that people outside it, my family for example, would have required considerable explanation to follow. I did not offer the explanation. I had learned by then that the explanation was not worth what it cost. I built the program for 2 years, 2023 and 2024, ages 36 and 37, and the flag officers who ran Naval knew my name and my work and treated both with the specific respect that is given to people who are performing at a high level in a demanding billet. I was respected in the rooms that mattered for the work. The room that had never mattered for the work was the one in my mother's house in Portsmouth, and I had stopped expecting it to. I want to be accurate about this, because accuracy is the thing I owe this story. I was not broken by any of it. I was not, in the clinical sense, damaged. I had simply spent the better part of 15 years learning to contain myself to a volume that would not inconvenience the people around me, and I had become very good at it, and I had mistaken being good at it for being fine. That distinction is one I would not fully understand until a Belgian Malinois named Bear slid across a gym floor and made it impossible to miss. September 12th, 2025. I am 38 years old, and I am at Dam Neck Annex in Virginia Beach because my brother, Ethan, who is 44 and a captain, 06, United States Navy, is retiring today. And I have flown in from San Diego the night before to attend the ceremony as quietly as possible. Quietly is the operative word. I have been quiet about things in this family for so long that it has become a default. A posture I carry without thinking about it the way you carry the muscle memory of a movement you learned young. I am not hiding. I am present. I simply have no particular interest in being the story at my brother's retirement, and so I have booked a hotel room and not told anyone which one. And I intend to sit in the back of the auditorium at 0900 hours and leave before the post-ceremony reception, and that is the plan. At 0500 hours, I cannot sleep, which is not unusual for me in unfamiliar beds, and so I pull on leggings and a faded hoodie that has the Naval Special canine program seal on the chest in letters worn too soft to read. And I pull my hair back, and I go down to the base gym. The gym at Dam Neck is a serious facility. It is not the kind of gym where people go to be seen. The people who use it at 0500 hours are the people who need to be there, and they are not in a generous mood about visitors who do not need to be there. I know this because I have been in rooms like this for 15 years. I know exactly what the energy in the room is when I walk in. I have always known. 3 operators at the weight rack look up when the door opens. They are large men in the specific way that DevGru personnel are large, functional, dense, shaped by work rather than aesthetics. 2 of them go back to what they were doing. One of them, the one I will later learn is not the senior chief, grins at me. Wandered in, sugar. He says it without malice, which almost makes it worse. Yoga studios down the hall. The other 2 chuckle. I do not respond beyond a brief glance. I have absorbed this exact frequency of dismissal in exactly this kind of room so many times across my career that I have a practiced and complete response to it, which is to notice it, file it, and continue. I move toward the cardio equipment. I am 38 years old and a commander in the United States Navy, and I run the canine program for Naval Special Warfare, and I have carried a dog 2 kilometers under fire in Syria, and I am in leggings and a faded hoodie, and these 3 men have made an entirely reasonable assessment based on available information. I am not angry. I have never had the luxury of staying angry about this particular thing. The biggest of the 3, Travis Booker, Senior Chief Petty Officer, 42 years old, the largest man in the room by a margin, says nothing. He goes back to his set. I register this without attaching anything to it. And then Bear lifts his head. He has been resting on a mat by the door, which is where I came in, and I did not look at him because I did not look at anything except the path to the cardio equipment, and I did not know it was him, and I would not have known it was him because it has been 2 years and 10 months, and the last time I saw him was through a chain link gate in a rehab facility, and he was healing and I was leaving. He lifts his head, and he looks at me, and something happens in his body that I cannot fully describe except to say that it is unmistakable. Every person who has worked with a trained dog knows this particular shift, the moment a dog recognizes something that matters at a level below decision-making. Bear stands. He is across the gym floor in under 3 seconds. He slides on the polished concrete and collapses at my boots, and he whines. He does not get up. He does not look at Booker. He puts his 75-pound body on the floor at my feet and makes a sound that I have not heard him make in 2 years and 10 months, and I have to stand very still for a moment to keep the room from doing something strange. The gym has gone silent. Not the polite silence of people being considerate. The complete silence of people who have encountered something they do not have a frame for and have stopped to find one. Bear, Booker says, and his voice carries the precision of a man who is used to being obeyed. Heel. Bear. Bear does not move. I look at Booker for the first time, and I can see in his face that this has not happened before. That this dog, who has held position under fire, has not broken for anyone in 3 years. Booker crosses the floor and stands in front of me. He is not hostile. He is confused, and underneath the confusion, he is a professional who is assessing something he cannot yet explain. "Ma'am?" he says. He does not say it the way the other one said, sugar. He says it the way you say it when you mean it. "How do you know my dog?" I kneel down. Not for the room. I kneel because this is the natural thing to do when you are with your dog. I run my thumb along the scar on Bear's left flank, the one that runs 7 centimeters from the edge of his ribcage, the one that was made by shrapnel in a collapsed alley outside Deir ez-Zor, Syria, on a night in October of 2022. The scar is smooth under my thumb. It will always be smooth under my thumb. I carried him out of Deir ez-Zor. The gym does not move. I stay where I am for a moment, kneeling on the floor of a DevGuru gym at 0500 in the morning, with my dog's head in my hands and the entire room holding its breath. And I do not perform any of it. I am not making a point. I am not demonstrating anything. I am simply with Bear, who has not seen me in 2 years and 10 months and has just run across a room to prove that he remembers. Word travels fast on a small base. It travels fastest when the story is the kind that people need to tell, the kind that answers a question people did not know they were asking. I have been at Dam Neck for less than an hour, and I am in leggings and a faded hoodie, and I have not told anyone who I am. But by the time I am back in my hotel room, showered and dressed and reaching for my service dress blues, the story's already moving. At 0850, in the lobby outside the auditorium, I am standing in my service dress blues with my ribbons and my rank and the quiet, particular posture of a commander who has been in formal Navy spaces for 16 years, and 2 flag officers find me within the first 4 minutes. The first one has read the Bear citation. He mentions this. He says my name and my program, and a specific operational detail that tells me he is not being polite. He is being accurate, which is a different thing. The second one references a policy change I shepherded through the program in 2024 that he has implemented at his command. Both of these conversations happen in the lobby, in the open, in earshot of the people standing nearby. Ethan is nearby. Caroline is nearby. I watch my mother's face go still in the particular way of a woman who is recalculating something she thought she had already figured out. Rear Admiral James Whitfield, 08, 58 years old, finds me 10 minutes before the ceremony begins. He co-signed Bear's citation in 2022. He is the presiding officer at my brother's retirement. He asks me, quietly and without preamble, if I would be willing to read my brother's commendation from the podium. He phrases it as a request, but every person in that lobby who hears it understands what it means, that the flag officer running the ceremony has identified me as the person whose voice belongs on the official record of Ethan's career. Ethan is asked. He says yes before our mother can speak. I stand at the podium in the auditorium at Dam Neck Annex, Virginia Beach, Virginia, at approximately 09:15 on September 12th, 2025. I am 38 years old. I read every line of my brother's commendation, his billets, his sea tours, his leadership assignments, his 22 years of active service in the United States Navy, in a clear and measured voice, because that is what the record requires. My mother is in the front row. She sits with her hands folded in her lap and listens to her daughter's voice fill the auditorium. I read clearly. I do not rush. I am very aware of the microphone and the room and the flag officers in the front rows, and Ethan on the stage watching me. He does not look at our mother. I read every word, and when I am finished, I return to my seat, and the ceremony continues. And I sit with my hands in my lap, and I think about the 38 years that preceded this moment and the very specific path that led me to this podium. I think about the fridge that held Ethan's Little League uniform and the shoebox that held my medals. I think about the commissioning ceremony in 2003, where I was 16 and decided I would do this, and about the sure, why not that came after. I think about the parallel promotions in 2019 and the text with the party hat emoji. I think about Christmas of 2021, And she does the dogs, and the table full of people who did not ask a follow-up question. And then I think about a Belgian Malinois sliding across a gym floor at 0500 in the morning, crying on my boot because he knew something this room was only now beginning to figure out. That is the thing about truth. You can defer it, you can manage its volume and contain it and file it for a very long time, but eventually something runs across the floor and refuses to be quiet about it, and the whole gym goes silent, and you are standing there in your leggings and your faded hoodie, and there is nothing left to manage. The ceremony ends before noon. The auditorium empties in the particular way of military ceremonies, purposeful, structured, the flag folding and the final handshakes and the applause that marks the end of an official chapter in a man's career. Ethan shakes Rear Admiral Whitfield's hand. He receives the flag. He stands in front of his family and accepts the moment with the kind of grace that 22 years of uniformed service teaches you. And I watch him and I think, he earned this. Whatever else is true, he earned this. The post-ceremony reception starts in the adjacent hall at approximately 11:30. I decline politely and collect my cover and my bag from the row where I have been sitting, and I find Ethan before the crowd closes around him. "Walk me to the kennel," he says. It is his idea. I notice this. We walk together through the base in the morning air, and the walk is mostly quiet, which is different from the comfortable quiet of two people who are easy together and more like the careful quiet of two people who are trying to establish what kind of quiet this actually is. Ethan has just retired. I am returning to San Diego tonight. We have 30 years of a particular kind of relationship behind us, and something has shifted in it this morning, irrevocably and in public, and neither of us has found the language for it yet. Bear is in his run when we reach the kennel block. He comes to the gate immediately, not with the explosive urgency of the gym, but with a steadiness that tells me he knows where he is now. Knows this visit is legitimate, knows there is time. He presses his face into my palm through the chain link, and his eyes close for a moment. The scar on his flank is visible from this angle. It is always visible. Ethan watches this for a long time. He has his hands in his pockets, and he is watching his sister with a military working dog, and something is happening in his face that I am not going to try to name because it belongs to him. "I didn't know about Syria," he says finally, low, without looking at me. "Not all of it. I want you to know I didn't know." He means this as an explanation. It lands as the thing he is actually saying, which is, he had not asked. There is a difference between not knowing and not asking. And Ethan, who is 44 years old and has just spent 22 years in the United States Navy, knows the difference as well as anyone. I do not say this out loud. I let the silence do it. We stand at Bear's Run for a few more minutes, and then I say I need to get to the airport, and Ethan nods. We walk back toward the main access road. The base is quiet in the particular way of a Friday morning after a ceremony when most of the command has dispersed to the reception. The flags are still at full staff. A working dog barks once in the kennel block behind us and goes quiet. At the drop-off point, Ethan puts his hand on my shoulder briefly. Not a hug, not yet, but a contact that means he is still there and not retreating. I tell him to take care of himself. He says he will. I go to the airport. At Norfolk International in the afternoon, I sit at my gate in my service dress blues with my carry-on at my feet, and I watch planes taxi on the tarmac. I do not call anyone. I have been in motion since 0500 hours. The gym, the ceremony, the kennel, the drive, and the day has been full of things that needed absorbing, and I have not yet absorbed them. The gym, the dog, the ceremony. Caroline's face when the flag officers said my name. The way the room in the auditorium sounded when I was reading. I have been in rooms where people underestimated me my entire career. I learned early to move past it cleanly, to not let it accumulate in ways that interfered with the work. What I had not learned, what I had not needed to learn until today, was how to sit with the fact that the most consistent source of it was my own family. That is a different kind of thing from the operators in the gym. The operators in the gym saw a woman in civilian clothes and made an assumption that was reasonable based on available information. My family had every available piece of information and made a different choice. The word for that choice is something I'm not yet ready to say, Sitting at this gate with my flight 40 minutes out, but I know the word exists, and I know that I am going to have to learn to say it. I watch a commercial aircraft turn onto the runway and accelerate and lift. It is a clean, efficient thing to watch. I have always found departures clarifying. Back in San Diego, 10 days later, I am in the operations office after the rest of the staff has left. And Dana Okafor, Lieutenant Commander, 04, 36 years old, my deputy and the most perceptive person I work with, stays back because she can tell something is still unresolved in me, which she reads the way she reads everything, which is accurately and without fanfare. "How was the ceremony?" she asks. "Fine," I say. Ethan retired. The Rear Admiral ran a tight ceremony. She looks at me. "How was it really?" she says. I sit with that for a moment, and then I tell her. I do not perform it, or compress it, or calibrate it against her capacity to receive it. For the first time in longer than I can clearly account for, I give an honest accounting of a 15-year pattern to someone who is not inside it. And I listen to my own voice, saying the things I have been filing for a decade and a half, and I hear them differently when they are in the air instead of in a folder. Dana does not say much. She listens with the focused attention of someone who understands that what is being offered requires space rather than response. "Did you ever tell them what happened in Syria?" she says when I have been quiet for a while. "No," I say. "Why not?" she says. I sit with that for a moment, and I realize it was not about clearance levels. It was that I already knew how they would receive it. And I had not wanted to watch them receive it wrong. I look at Dana, and she looks at me, and neither of us says anything else for a little while, because the room is already full. I called my mother in mid-October of 2025. I initiated the call, which meant I had already decided what I was going to say and had given myself enough time to say it clearly. I am 38 years old, and I have briefed flag officers on program operations and managed the placement of working dogs into combat environments and carried an injured animal 2 kilometers under fire in Syria. And I know how to deliver a message precisely. I sat at my desk and I called Caroline Cross, age 70, Portsmouth, Virginia, and I was calm. I told her that the framing she had used for my career, the dog girl, she does the dogs, the particular diminishment that she had been applying in public and in private for the better part of a decade, was something I was no longer willing to absorb. I did not catalog the history. I did not deliver a list of incidents with dates and locations, though I had them. I stated the standard going forward. One thing: clear ask, clear consequence, no theatrics. I'm not asking you to be proud of me, Mom. I'm asking you to stop explaining me to people in ways that shrink the work. That's all. One thing. She did not respond with clarity. She said she didn't know why I was so sensitive. She said it was a joke. She said that Ethan never complains about how she describes his career, which is true in the way that many things my mother says are true. Accurate on the surface and structurally wrong below it. Ethan had never needed to complain because she had always described his career in full. She said she had been bragging about me for years, which I believe she believed, and which told me everything about the distance between how she received her own behavior and what her behavior actually was. She cycled through 4 or 5 deflections and then asked whether I was eating enough and whether I had a social life in San Diego. "I don't know why you're so sensitive. I've always been proud of you. I tell everyone about your dogs." She said, "Your dogs." I let it go. That was the last time I let it go. The call ended without resolution in the conventional sense, but it ended with something said that had not been said before, and that is a different kind of thing from resolution. I had named it. I had put it in the air in clear language and attached my name to it and declined to take it back. And that was the thing that needed to happen, regardless of how it was received. I did not attend Thanksgiving. I texted my mother the week before, brief, warm, clear, to say I would not be there this year and that I hoped she had a good holiday and I would call on the day. She called 3 times on Thanksgiving morning. I answered the 3rd call and kept it to 12 minutes. We were polite with each other. We are always polite with each other, my mother and I. Politeness has been the container we use for most of our relationship, which has never bothered me as much as it should have. In Portsmouth, I am told later, the table had a gap. Not just the physical chair, the operational gap. I had been, for a very long time, the person who managed the logistics of family gatherings, who smoothed the frictions between conversations, who kept the emotional weather of the room at a manageable temperature. I had been doing this so automatically and for so long that nobody had registered it as labor. It was simply the thing that happened when Maddie was there. When I was not there, it did not happen, and the absence was felt in the way that labor is felt when it stops. I had a good Thanksgiving, turkey from a place on Harbor Island, a bottle of something worth opening, dinner with Dana and 2 colleagues from the program. Nobody compared me to anyone at the table. I noticed that. I noticed it in the particular way you notice the absence of a sound you had stopped hearing because it had been present for so long. The silence where the comparison had been was more audible than the comparison itself had been in years. Ethan called in late November. I was in my apartment, evening, watching rain on the bay. He was calling from Virginia Beach, where he had been living since the retirement, and he was, I could hear, choosing his words in real time. He started in the wrong place. "Mom's upset," he said. "I know," I said. He was quiet for a moment, and then he corrected himself, not overtly, not as an announcement, but in the way that someone corrects course when they have recognized the error while still moving. He said he was trying to understand what had happened. He said he had been thinking about it since Dam Neck, and he was not sure he had the full picture. "You already understand it," I said. "That's where you start." He did not argue. He said, "Okay." And then, after another moment, he said okay again, as if confirming something to himself. We ended the call without resolution either, but I could hear something in his voice that I had not heard before. The particular quality of a man who is actually trying, as opposed to a man who is performing the attempt. That quality is recognizable when it is real, and it was real, and I placed the phone face down on the kitchen counter and made myself a cup of tea, and did not pick it back up for the rest of the night. That was new, the not picking it back up. For most of my adult life, not picking up the phone would have cost me something. A low-grade guilt about what I should be managing, who I should be checking on, what gap I should be filling. That night I made tea and watched the rain, and the cost was nothing. The nothing was new. I sat with it carefully, the way you sit with a new feeling until you understand whether it is trustworthy, and by the time I went to bed, I had decided that it was. In the weeks following Thanksgiving, the family system adjusted to my withdrawal in the ways that systems adjust when a load-bearing element is quietly removed. I had been load-bearing for a very long time without knowing it or without admitting it, and the removal produced consequences that I observed from a distance. My mother called Ethan more. This was not strategy on her part. She was simply reaching for the available resource, which was now him rather than the combination of him and me. Ethan, who had retired in September and had more unstructured time than he had possessed at any point in his adult life, took the calls. He listened. He was, by his own account later, hearing things in those conversations that he had never had occasion to hear when his career was running at full speed and the family system had been operating with all its usual buffering in place. With me gone from the buffer, he heard the actual signal. He was not entirely comfortable with what it told him. In San Diego, I noticed something shift. Dana mentioned it first because Dana notices things and does not wait to see if they resolve themselves. "You seem different," she said. "Since the ceremony. Good different." I thought about that for a moment. "I think I was managing a lot of things that had nothing to do with this office," I said. "Turns out they took up a lot of room." She nodded. She did not belabor it, because Dana is good at not belaboring things, which is one of the reasons I trust her. The difference was material. I was more present in meetings. I was less careful about taking up space in conversations that I was entitled to take up space in. I was less inclined to soften my directives into suggestions, which had been a habit I had developed over years of operating in rooms where assertiveness from me required more justification than the same assertiveness from the next person in the room. I was not louder. I was simply less compressed. The compression had been doing something, and the something it had been doing was making room for other people who were not making the same room for me. Ethan, in Virginia Beach in December of 2025, did something specific. He told me about it later, in February, and I have thought about it many times since. He looked up Bear's citation. The Canine Medal of Heroism citation is a matter of official record. It is not classified. It is not restricted. It is a public document that names the dog, the action, the date, the location, and the submitting officer. He read it. He read it twice, he said. The second time he was looking for his name in the acknowledgments. It was not there, because there was no reason for it to be there. He had not been present, he had not known. And he had not known because he had not asked, which is a different category of absence than not being told. And Ethan, who is a captain, '06, United States Navy, retired, and who has spent his career in a service where the distinction between these two things is the difference between leadership and its failure, understood the category he was in. On January 15th, 2026, I turned 39. It was a Tuesday. I worked, ate lunch at my desk, worked some more, and drove home. Ethan sent a long text, clearly the product of real effort, about the citation, about Syria, about what he was sorry for. I read it twice on my lunch break and put my phone in my desk drawer and finished the afternoon, because a text is a beginning and not an arrival, and I had spent too many years treating beginnings as arrivals. I was done with that habit. That evening, Dana and 2 colleagues took me to dinner. Nobody mentioned Ethan, nobody mentioned Caroline. For the first time in memory, my birthday belonged to the life I had actually built, rather than to the management of the life I had been born into. I drove home along the coast with the window down and noticed something. I was not bracing for anything. That absence was the newest feeling of all, something the body registers before the mind names it. In early February, Ethan flew to San Diego. He was already at the coffee shop when I arrived, which told me something. He had the look of a man who has spent several months rehearsing the first 8 seconds of a conversation, and I let him carry them over the finish line himself, because carrying his words for him was the old habit, and I was done with it. He named it. Not 30 years of accumulated inventory, but the specific failures he was prepared to own in clear language, which is the only form of ownership that means anything. He said he had let our mother say things he should have corrected. He said the dog girl framing was something he had used himself first, privately, then watched her pick up because correcting it was inconvenient. I used to say it too, he said. That's mine. I know, I said. I've known for a while. We walked afterward along the waterfront near Coronado, cool February air, gray-green bay. I told him I was not making him earn his way back on a point system. What I needed was for the thing he had named to stay named and for him to be honest in the room going forward. He said he could do that. He said it plainly, without elaborating, which was the right way to say it. I believed him, not because I was extending charity, but because he had shown up without asking me to make it easier for him first. That counted. Our mother had not done what Ethan had done. The calls were polite and shorter. I was warm and not expansive. I was not punishing her. I was simply no longer performing ease I did not feel, and the difference was cleaner than I expected. I drove him to the airport at 1800 hours. We hugged at the curb, a real one. I did not feel healed. Something was being rebuilt by people choosing it rather than defaulting to it, and that was what it was supposed to feel like when it was real. In early March, I received official notification that Bear had been formally retired from active service, age and the cumulative effects of his shrapnel injury. Approximately 8 years old, placed with a veteran handler in Virginia Beach who had a yard and the competence for the work. I read the notification twice, logged it, and closed the folder. That evening I walked on the beach. Bear had 8 years, 2 operational tours, a canine medal of heroism, and 1 morning in a gym at Dam Neck where he ran across the floor and reminded me who I was. That is a full career. The shrapnel in his flank was a record that belonged to both of us. Nobody could revise it. In late March, I was asked to deliver the keynote at the NES Dollars Multi-Purpose Canine Program Symposium in April. I said yes in approximately 4 seconds. Preparing the address, I wrote a line I had not planned about what it costs to stay in the work when it is invisible, to carry a dog 2 kilometers under fire and file the citation, and say nothing to the people who should have been asking. About doing the thing anyway, not because you don't feel the cost, but because the work is real, whether or not anyone with authority over your sense of yourself is willing to see it. I wrote, "The work was always enough. The question was whether I was going to let the people who didn't see it determine whether it counted." I looked at that line for a long time. Then I closed the laptop and decided I would say it at the podium. The week before the symposium, I drove to Virginia Beach and visited Bear. He came across the yard slowly, graying at the muzzle, moving with the deliberateness of a dog who has decided he no longer needs to hurry. He put his head into my hands. I checked the scar on his left flank. Still there. Always will be. At the symposium, I said the line. The room went quiet in the way rooms go quiet when something true is being said in exactly the right size of language. Caroline called a few days later. Ethan had told her something about the citation. What came out was sideways and partial, but it was reaching. She did not say she was wrong. She said she had heard. I told her I was glad, and I meant it. Late April, a weekend morning, coffee and the bay visible from the window. Bear in his yard in Virginia Beach. Ethan is building something honest 3 time zones east. My mother is somewhere in the slow country of beginning to understand. I was not waiting for anything. The work was real and recognized by the people in a position to know. I had held my shape until the shape was legible. A dog ran across a gym floor and refused to be quiet about it. And everything I had been filing for 15 years came into the open air. The coffee was strong, the bay was still. I was 39 years old, and I was not bracing for anything at all. Sometimes the hardest boundary to set is with the people who taught you to stay small. If this story hit home, like this video, subscribe for more stories about self-respect, family, betrayal, and finally choosing yourself. Have you ever had to stop explaining your worth to someone who should have seen it already? Have you ever walked away from being underestimated? And do you believe forgiveness is possible without going back to the way things were? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd really like to hear your story.